When I sent Jeanett the brief message asking her about Trolltunga, she responded very quickly, less than a day after I sent the message. In her typical fashion, with a very brief response, she told me, "Many people come to Ota and see Trolltunga." In my memory, because I do not have the messages available to read, she left me with the impression that Trolltunga was an important part of Oda, and she seemed to be happy that I had asked. At the time I sent her this message, it was unclear to me if Oda was actually where Jeanett lived. But by asking her this question, it also became clear for me to feel that Oda was the community where Jeanett lived, and it was good for me to think that Jeanett was indeed from Oda. Okay? So, why is that important? Well, there's this notion that I was going to meet Jeanett, and then what? Am I supposed to be am I supposed to show chivalry and hand her a rose and take her on this hike in this land in a romantic excursion? In this pre-planned destination that we would meet and go on this romantic hike together because I'm a master of the land and I know where to take her is that what was supposed to happen when I didn't even know whether or not she lived there? Exactly. Whether or not, it doesn't make sense. That was what I should be do or thinking when I didn't even know if she was going to meet me up until when I sent her the message after I arrived in Norway, because I was taking it so cool and chill about sending her messages. Now that I knew that I could focus on Oda as Jeanett's community, I did not take much more time to learn about Trolltunga. I knew that lots of people visited Trolltunga, and I knew how long the hike was. Like I was saying, I'm not a professional guide, but I've spent a lot of time in Norway. I know the difference between Norway's climate and the climate here in the United States where I live. I know that Trondheim is much warmer climate than Traverse City, and I know that Oda is right on the ocean, about 200 miles south of Trondheim. I knew that and my cousin who lives in Lofoten in Stamsund, the climate there is actually probably even a little bit warmer than here in northern Michigan. It's a little bit warmer. It's darker, of course, because of the lack of sunlight, but it's actually a little bit warmer, I think, what I've seen. And I think we might even get a little bit more snow than in Lofoten. So I was very comfortable in knowing that if there's a marked trail that takes me to Trolltunga, which it appeared that there was on social media because there were guides that would take winter hikes. I saw people there in the winter. I had a pretty good feeling that I could manage hiking to Trolltunga. I had just run in the Trondheim half marathon a couple of months before that, so I was feeling very healthy in the prime of my life. I'm not sure how many people should be extremely worried about me. I think they should be excited that I'm actually gonna, have the opportunity to do it as long as the weather was cooperating and not taking any risks with the weather. That's the problem. I had a general sense of what it would be like to decide to hike to Trolltunga if I made my trip to Oda. If Jeanett responded, once I arrived in Norway. But remember, I already had plans to make the trip to Lofoten if she didn't follow through. I was so very hopeful that Jeanett would follow through. And for those of you who keep hearing me talk about that over and over and over again, it's an important part of the story that you need to understand. And I want you not to forget that, because as I tell the story, in the future, for instance, why I chose to the very last day to give her the tiles, it'll make more sense. As it was getting closer to the date when I would go to Norway in March 2018, I would spend lots of time looking at pictures of Oda, mostly from Instagram. It was very exciting for me to feel excited about visiting Oda, and there were many pictures that I saw that made me excited to see the community. I remember seeing the big rocks in pictures, the Norway's largest stone. I remember seeing those pictures before I even had arrived in Oda. The rocks that Jeanette and I would end up standing on. I remember seeing the big, huge oak tree in pictures. Trolltunga I remembered seeing. Of course, there's hundreds of pictures of the waterfront in Oda. I was learning about all these different places seemed to be what everyone was looking at. Other places of nature, people hiking on the tops of mountains. I was seeing all of this, not sure where they all were, but it must have to do with Oda. Learning about the community on Instagram. Since I had made trips to Norway 8 times before this trip, I was very familiar with what I was seeing. But West Norway did have a different landscape than what I had experienced on prior trips to Norway. It was a question mark as to whether or not Jeanette would follow through and agree to meet. That was the question mark, and that's why it's so important to understand why I was not preparing to, if I was meeting Jeanette in Røros, then I would have known all kinds of hikes to go on with her. And then I could have been Mr. Chivalry, and I could have, been the knight in shining armor, the white horse, and I could have taken her on a hike and told her stories about, this is where my grandpa did this at, and we could have gone hiking up to Muggagruva near Oda, near Røros, and I could have explained to her this copper mine was this. Okay, so no, I'm not an expert in Oda when I'm going there. I'm not trying to be an expert in going there. I want to go there and have fun and go for a hike. Okay, as I'll probably tell in the future stories if this topic comes up. I had people telling me things like, Jeanette's probably never even been to the glacier before. So what am I supposed to imagine about what Jeanette knows or doesn't know? Or what she's experienced about Oda or hasn't experienced. It's impossible to imagine what someone has experienced or not. I didn't even know if necessarily she lived there. It was a question mark as to whether or not Jeanette would follow through after I arrived in Trondheim. We know that she did. And agree to meet. So I had to be reserved as to becoming emotionally committed to Oda. But stay interested in exploring, which is what I'm explaining I did when it comes to Trolltunga. It was for those reasons that when Jeanette did make plans to meet me, I had a rough idea to what to expect when I arrived in Oda. But since I was taking my time and care not to move too fast, Oda was still a mysterious place. But I was excited to learn about this community as I would come to understand Jeanette's interest in me. Now, if we go